Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. We're back again. So we're going to do another reading from Rogues Gallery from the Soleman books. And today's chapter is Soleman and Flats investigate once more. So might as well get going right away. Soleman was covering the ground outside of the mansion. Detective Podolsky was talking to the owner, who was in bed with a cast on his leg. Flats was checking in the mansion's interior and noting what was missing and what had not been stolen. In the room where Mr. Vanderman worked, he examined the desk. In a drawer, he found several business cards with the name of a club he had never heard of, the Victoria Club at 1885 Vic Lane. Not being wealthy, he was unfamiliar with those secret domains of luxury and comfort afforded to men of leisure. On impulse, he took one of the cards. He finished his examination and listing of stolen goods. He only had a listing of the items based on the blank spaces left behind and an insurance inventory. He had no idea of the true value or maker's identification. In his opinion, people made the value much higher for insurance purposes. He went up to the man's bedroom and listened in on Podolsky's discussion. But I really can't tell you more than I already have. All I remember is a huge bat flying in. Thing had to be over 4 feet, maybe 5. I don't mind saying I was terrified and ran out screaming. Suddenly my legs were encased in some sort of, solidified foam, and then so was my lower face. I heard the rush of a group of men entering my house, the sounds of many bats exiting, holding something, and then I remember some tall man telling me something, but I was so confused I can't remember what. Suddenly this huge guy slammed his foot on my leg. Passed out. How I got upstairs and in bed with a splint on my leg is beyond me. Detective Podolsky rechecked his notes. It is unusual for a burglar to break a leg of someone, much less fix you up afterwards. Hey, things just don't make sense. He looked at the man again, noticing that the collar of his nightshirt had shifted. What looked like whip marks were now apparent. Looks like you took a beating, too. Oh, no, a whipping would be more accurate. It didn't last long, though. I heard the leader of the group call time, and the man stopped. Podolsky added to his notes, a timed whipping and a broken leg. Sounds as though they were trying to accomplish a pretty definite action of revenge. Have you ever inflicted these types of actions on anyone in the past? The man was about to speak just as suddenly he clammed up for a second. For a second, a memory was trying to burst through, only to be stopped at the last moment. Podolsky looked at the man and nodded. His silence and perplexed look told he might have. Well, sir, we'll look into this and let you know our progress. When you feel up to it, a listing of what has been taken would help a lot. He left the man who remained frozen. Memories were trying mightily to break through, and the memories were not pleasant. After the police left, he hobbled downstairs to his office and rummaged around in his desk. Pulling out a large framed picture, he sat and stared at it. The face was beautiful and with warm, smiling eyes. He brushed his finger alongside the cheek. He spent long hours staring at the picture, trying to figure out who she was and why he had her picture. He had fallen in love with a lady, and the only thing he knew of her was from the picture. That was the attractive part. He really loved her. One memory was breaking, though. His mind went back to the time he had met a man while out on a walk and been offered a chance to join what the man said was an interesting club. The Victorian Club was based on Victorian ideals. He attended a few meetings and gradually began to melt into the mold. He liked the feeling of authority and power. He became a master of his home, whose word was law. Pieces of other memories were working their way into his consciousness. He had brought this woman to some of the dances. Her beauty matched that of the other men's wives. The women would go into their section and discuss what was owed to their husbands, indoctrinating newcomers into the Victorian mold. The men would drink fine brandy and smoke cigars, discussing ways of increasing their wealth and maintaining a Victorian home. In time, he became colder, more authoritarian, and she gradually wrapped herself in interests of her own. She stopped being attentive and loving. At first, he was so wrapped up in business and increasing his wealth that he hadn't even noticed. Eventually, she wanted to stop going to the club, for him to stop as well. It angered him when she refused. He ordered her to attend him, to do as he commanded. She was no longer his wife, but a servant who must cater to his every whim. When she had refused once too often, he had pulled off his belt and whipped her. She had screamed and begged him to stop. When the beating had lasted a minute, she struggled to rise and escape. She had fallen over a footstool and crawled out of the room. He had followed, threatening her with worse than he had given. She reached the stairs and rolled down them. Her leg struck a heavy banister and broke. Pain was too much for her, and she had fainted. Looking at her torn dress, mottled skin, and leg with a bone sticking out, he was shocked at what he had done. He dressed and splinted her leg, changed her dress, and called an ambulance. He placed her at the corner for the ambulance to pick her up. Terrified at what he went to the club. He had been ordered to close the house, and by noon the following day had purchased the one he now lived in. The man at the club had assisted to change his identity. Members of the club brought the contents of his old home to the new. The speed and efficiency with which all this was accomplished showed that this was a regular occurrence. It had been recommended that he seek a new wife and pay for her. Okay, one moment. Read that wrong. It had been recommended that he seek out his wife and pay for her care. He was also to leave a sum equivalent to a year's lodging and housekeeping for her maintenance. After that, she was on her own. The man who had led the club had told him to forget her. He had heard that she had tried to find him without success since he had a new identity. He had seen her only once, and that was accidentally. Walking in the meaner side of town, just out of curiosity, he spied her walking through the dingy street. His whipping had been so severe that, even though short, she was deeply scarred from the neck down to the lower back. She limped, and her walking was agonizing, even with a cane. He followed her as she made her way to a mission for women. He wondered how many others were wives of club members. Wondered, but never had the strength of mind to find out. Now he is seeking her replacement. The members of the club were insisting that a true Victorian man required a subservient wife, and it was his duty to find a woman of note and bring her into the fold. He pulled his nightshirt over his head and looked at the recent scars. They were the mirror image of what he had inflicted on her. They were raising to an angry red. Some had marred his face, requiring him to wear a scarf in the future. He would probably limp as he had seen her, and like her, the pain would reform his face into a grimacing facade of agony. At noon, he took a taxi to the Victorian Club. He was not allowed inside. He no longer fit the image they wanted to project. He could not look the way he did and find a suitable partner for the dances. He was now and forever ostracized and an outcast. At the shoebox, Podolsky, Flats, and Soleman were going over their findings. Soleman was examining the piece of unusual foam he'd found by the front steps. He tested it every way he could, except for tasting it. It's a form of mousse, hair mousse, from what the chemical analysis shows. There's a hardener or several, which I believe to be alcohol-based. He then did the unthinkable and licked the sample. Yep, definitely alcohol-based. And there is a heating element along with a seltzer agent. Flats groaned. So, man, I really wish you wouldn't taste the test samples. One of these days you'll test the wrong one, and poof, that's the end of Soleman. Soleman grinned at his friend. I only do it at, so I'm sure there's nothing else that can harm me. He went to the bathroom, emerging moments later with a gel ball filled with a white concoction. I brought some of your hair mousse, Flats. I hope you don't mind. He took a slingshot and loaded the ball into the cup. Firing it at a statue, the ball burst, bubbled into a foam, and solidified in a matter of moments. Podolsky compared the foam against the sample. I'd say they're almost identical. Let's confirm the comparison. Well, looks as if one of the people we're looking for is a hairstylist, and an exceptional one at that. They're well versed in combining their wares and with a keen knowledge of action and reaction. Soleman was looking at a small sliver of metal that was found near the sample. Flats, what do you make of this? Flats looked at the metal through the magnifying glass. Well, it's tapered to a rounded point. It's not a nail, brad, or tack. It was created like this. I don't have a clue what use it was put to. He ran his finger through his hair in agitation. As he walked over to hand it over to Podolsky, he caught sight of his rumpled locks and pulled out a comb to fix his hair. Just at the point of putting the comb back in his pocket, he saw that the teeth were identical to the small fragment. He held the metal piece alongside the comb and showed it to the other men. Well, gents, I don't think we need to look any further. One of these men is definitely in the hairstyling business. Podolsky was now at the large row of encyclopedias that graced the tall bookshelves, along with legal volumes and other sources of information. Arriving at the letter B, he consulted the section regarding bats. He was looking for one that could be in the 4-foot range. He had his doubts that any bat that large actually existed. To his surprise, there was a section that described the dwelling and habits of Acirodon jubatus. And while it was nowhere near 4 feet, it was almost a foot long, and to a sleepy, frightened man, it's possible that it seemed a great deal larger. He cast around his findings and sat down to think. This bat was from the Philippines and not anywhere else. Well, it might have been acquired through a zoo, and he'd heard that certain pet stores there dealt in exotic animals. He checked around if there were any shops that dealt in these animals. Podolsky rose, stretched, and bade the two men good night. He'd had a long day, and tomorrow promised to be just as busy. Soleman and Flats went home to had a final drink in the lounge. As they finished their drinks, Perry noticed a gleam of light on Opedus's shoulder. Filled with curiosity, he rose and picked at the offending item. It was a small shard of solidified hair gel. Opedus laughed. Does that sometimes when I have the heat too high. It sets too quickly, and instead of a head of hair, it looks more like a helmet. I got to put a regulator on that hair dryer so I don't overdo it. I think it's geared a little higher than it should be. Both men went to bed. It had been an exhausting day for them as well. Oedipus went directly to sleep, but Soleman lay with his hands cupped behind his head. Something important had just been said and was working itself to bring it to his attention. As he racked his mind for what he was missing, he slowly began to doze. His breathing slowed and he softly snored. Suddenly he sat bolt upright and his eyes wide. The shard! He pounded on Oedipus's door, who sleepily opened it to the summons. What's up? The place burned down? The shard, that little piece of whatever I found on your shoulder. That was a thin type of hair lacquer mixed with your gel exposed to mild heat. Put a thick coating of high-strength hair lacquer and the dryer at its highest setting, that could do it. Oedipus shook his head to wake up. Perry, what are you talking about? Perry was rummaging around the bathroom looking for any hairspray. He found a small can of high-strength lacquer. The label proclaimed, guaranteed to hold your hair in the strongest breeze. He slapped the can. Yep, this should do it. He grabbed the hairdryer and tossed it to Oedipus. See if you can gear that up to the absolute highest wind that heat possible. I think this is what was used before. Oedipus tried gear changes for an hour until he was convinced that he had the highest setting possible. He had to add a couple of gears from his backup dryer to get it as high as that. He braced himself and pointed at a vase of flowers. Pumping hard, the heated wind blew the vase towards the edge of the table. The high heat dried the flowers to brown. Perry handed him the can of hair lacquer and had him work the two together. The flowers became encased in a transparent shell. Perry used the blower without heat, chilling the shell, and watched it shatter. Oedipus, I want you to immobilize me with it. Give it a few seconds to minute after it sets to see if I can break out, then hit it with a cold breeze. Otis wasn't too keen on performing the experiment, but Perry insisted they had to find out for sure if this could immobilize anyone, or if it would harm or even kill someone. That was the only way to find out for sure. Otis duly sprayed and superheated the hair lacquer and then checked his watch. From a small amount of fogging around the mouth and nose, it was apparent that Perry could breathe. You could also see the slight movement of the arms and chest as Perry fought to break free. Since Perry was able to breathe, Otis waited the full minute before blowing the blast of cold air. The casing became brittle and Perry was able to break free. Well, the smell was unpleasant, but not life-threatening. As you saw, I was unable to free myself at first. The lacquer, when superheated, was remarkably strong. I had very limited movement, too. He sat down to think. Rather a brilliant means of immobilizing someone without harming them. Even if left encased for quite a bit longer, no harm could come to a person. It's good to know that one of our foes seemed to be humane. He reached into the drawer beneath the telephone stand and pulled out a thick notebook. Turning to the page for barbers and the one for beauty shops, he began to write out a list for them to visit. All that he chose were in the best part of town and would have all the paraphernalia for the weapons they had seen. By omitting the meaner businesses, he was missing the fact that a barber of lower order would be in far greater need of becoming a thief than a stylist whose business was flourishing. It was Otis who would see the distinction and set them on the correct path. For the next few days, the two men went around to barbers and hair salons. Perry and Otis had their hairstyles so often that neither man knew what their hair looked like originally. In each salon, one would talk to the barber or stylist while the other talked with the receptionist. In 2 days, they had elicited no new information, no leads, and no idea where to proceed. Over lunch in a nearby diner, they discussed their progress or lack of it. Well, pal, I don't think we've made any headway. I'm sure we're on the right track, though. Too much points the way towards a professional in the tonsorial trade. Otis brought out the silver piece of metal that they believed came from a metallic comb. There was something homely about it, something plain for all its silver elegance. An idea slowly slipped into his mind. Perry, what if we're looking at this from the wrong end? What if the person we're looking for is not from a high-end shop, but a plebeian one? There are a few shops in the meaner side of town that might want to branch out due to the small amount they raise through honest trade. Perry looked at his friend and partner in wonder. During their time together, Otis's vocabulary had enlarged considerably. Like himself, he chose his words carefully to express exactly what was meant. Plus, he was intelligent, and Perry appreciated the fact that he saw things from a different perspective. Made them a good team that respected each other's point of view. I think you might be onto something. I mean, who would need funds more than one whose shop did not bring in sufficient money? Tomorrow we'll start the rounds again of the lower districts. They need to visit a second-hand shop to purchase clothes to fit the mission. The bill came and Otis pulled out his wallet. Hell, this one's on me, he said, grinning as he paid the bill. The card fell out and sailed in front of Perry. He picked it up and looked at it curiously. The Victorian Club? Never heard of it. Can you tell me about it, or is it a secret society? Otis looked at the card. He had forgotten all about it. Well, frankly, I haven't a clue. I found it while we were out on the last case and put it away for future reference. The fact that the men lived in a Victorian style with oil lamps and rich patterned wallpaper and thick curtains and rich furnishings all seemed to fit together. Looking at the back was a notice that said prospective member with a signature. Harry was impressed with his reasoning. Well, I belong to a few clubs myself, but this one's new to me. He pulled out his wallet and rifled through the visiting cards he had been handed recently. He found one that was a match for Otis's. See, I have one too. It was handed me one evening at the theater when we were out with Persephone and Sharon. Turning it over was another prospective member with another signature. How do you say we pay them a call? Might prove informative. with a shrug. All right, but I doubt we'll find any low to middle class barbers there. All right, that's it for today. Next chapter is the Victorian Club, where they go and actually see this place. That will be another single. So, and then the one after that is Skid Row. So we're getting close to halfway through. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Can't get that under. And I hope you're enjoying this book. I'm about 22,000 words into the next version of the Sheriff in a Small Town. So I'll be looking forward to, hopefully I'll have that done before I have this book done. And then we'll start reading that. So that'll be book 4 of Sheriff in a Small Town. I haven't got a title yet for it, but I'll think of one pretty soon. So probably back to the beginning or something. Anyways, that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading, which will be Friday. And that's all I've got for today. So I look forward to seeing you again. Be good and be good to yourself. Bye. I know I've got enough here.